Hey everybody, it's Kory. Thanks for joining me. So I was shocked. This first week in April, it's come and gone, but I learned a lot, and I was surprised by what I learned. Now, let me share with you what I learned. First, got a lot of phone calls. As soon as April 1st hit, the phone started ringing more than it had for the past couple months due to the winter. The phone calls, the emails, they were people saying, "Hey, our house is under contract from wherever they're at, and we're going to be looking at homes here in the next week or two." Or, "Hey, we've got money in the bank from the sale of a home or from an investment, and we want to put that money into a real estate asset." They didn't want their money in the bank. And that was kind of the common theme that I found was quite interesting, is that almost to a T, everybody was worried about their money in the bank, or when they put money in the bank, that it wasn't going to be secure. And they wanted to put that money into a real estate asset. So that's an interesting thing that I learned this week. As far as showings go, I showed more than a dozen homes this week. Had three different clients that we were showing homes to this week, all looking at different types of properties. And that tells me that the volume's back. Another thing that tells me the buyer volume is back is I like to go, when I show a property, I like to go to the counter where real estate agents leave their cards. And not all real estate agents leave their cards like they should, but that is a good indicator as to how many other buyers your buyer is competing with. So, for example, when we went into the first house the second day, there were 10 cards on the counter, and I told my client, those are 10 other buyers that are looking for the same thing you're looking for. And wherever you go, if you don't get this house, you're going to be competing with those other buyers for the next property. And we haven't seen that volume of showings, like 10 cards in the second day, probably since early 22 or even 2021. So that was interesting. And I learned that there's quite a few more buyers in the market for the first week of April than I had anticipated. I also talked to some other professionals this week. I talked to a real estate agent who I highly respect. He is an agent that represents a builder here in town. And he told me that in the last couple weeks, they've put 12 homes under contract. That's unheard of. And that tells me also that there's more buyers coming back into the market. Also talked to an inspector on one of the jobs that we had. And I asked him, "What are you seeing as far as volume?" And he says, "Well, just this last week, we've gone back to doing two-a-days, which means they do two inspections in one day." And he said all throughout the winter, they weren't even doing that. And all of a sudden, like a light switch went on, they're doing two-a-days again. So between the phone calls and the emails, the showings, the multiple bid offers, and my conversations with that other agent and with an inspector, all of those really kind of surprised me at the volume of buyers that we're seeing in the market all of a sudden. And I'm not making a bold prediction that the market's going to be crazy or record setting, but what I am saying is that it surprised me how many buyers are in the market already. Now, I couldn't wait to confirm with the data from the MLS to see if the statistics backed up what I was experiencing out in the field. And sure enough, when I ran the stats last night, I was surprised at what I saw. Let me share that with you now. All right, looking at the mortgage rates for last week, the 30-year fixed rate finished at 6.28 for the week. That was down 0.04 from the week before. And it was also up from a year ago. This time last year, the rates were at 4.99. And if you look at the trend line here, you can see that rates went up a little bit towards the end of February, and since then they've been kind of going down. So again, rates finished at 6.28. Okay, looking at the totals for the market, we're going to look at last week, the week before, and last year compared to this week. So first, new listings. And remember I told you guys that there were some surprising things. The first thing that was surprising to me was the new listings. Last week, we had 147 new listings. Not a big deal. It was consistent with what we saw the week before, which is about 150 new homes coming onto the market. What was surprising to me is that last year this time, there were 173 homes hitting the market. We have 15% fewer homes coming onto the market this year compared to last year. And if you're going to see prices come down, it's real hard to have prices come down without good homes coming onto the market. And that is just not happening. Now, total homes for sale. Your inventory is at 1,248 homes for last week. That was down slightly from the week before, which tells us that we're eating a little bit into that inventory. And then if you compare last week of 1,248 with the same week last year, which had 712 homes on the market for that week, we are up 75% year over year. And I have to stress again, like I always do, that 712 homes for the month of April last year, that was the all-time low inventory. And this 1248 is the third lowest year in history for inventory. It only had lower inventory in 22 and 21. So again, third lowest year in inventory in history. We are still well below normal total homes for sale, even though we're up 75% over last year's all-time low. Okay, pending sales. Last week we had 100 pending sales. The week before we had 109. Why is this significant? Well, compare it to this time last year. Last year, same week, there were 90 pending sales. We had 11% more pending sales this year over last year. And if you remember last year, the first week of April, interest rates were still below 5%, and it was still the top of the market as far as activity. And we beat the pending sales this week compared to last year. That shocked me. And again, not making bold predictions, but the numbers are trending up that are showing buyers are coming back into the market. Now, closed sales. This one was kind of interesting because of weather, and I'll show you here in a second. Closed sales, remember this is a lagging indicator. When you see closed sales for last week, those are things that went pending 30 to 40 days ago because the average escrow is about 30 to 40 days. So to understand what happened 30 to 40 days ago, that gives you your best synopsis of the history. And why it's important is because you notice that last week closed sales were down from the week before that, which were 86. Let me go to the next slide here. This slide shows the snowfall totals for the city of Coeur d'Alene over the last 7 years. And you'll notice that this year we had 44 inches of snow. And what was significant about this year is it just was a long, drawn-out winter. It started early and it ended late. And it really hit us the last week of February, first week of March, which is this little squared-off box here. During those 2 weeks, we had 12 inches of snow. And why is that significant? Well, if you go forward 30 to 40 days, that puts you back here at our closed sales. So 30 to 40 days ago, there was a lot of snow in town here, and people were not looking at homes. They weren't coming into town because they couldn't get flights. And if you remember, that was the same storm that when it hit California, you heard stories of the town of Big Bear having people trapped in their homes because there was so much snow. That same storm, when it hit us, it impacted us in that people just weren't looking for homes. And when they're not looking for homes, you have fewer pending sales, which translates 30 to 40 days later to fewer closed sales. And if you look, the week prior to that, we had more closed sales because the storm hadn't hit yet. And what's significant about these 86 closed sales is how similar they are to last year's 91. Now remember, this 37% drop over last year is from the week we just came out of, which had the slower sales because of that storm. But if you look at the week before, 86, and then a year ago, 91, we're pretty much at the same amount of closed sales from last year. So when you total everything up here, listings are down, pending sales are up, and closed sales are pretty similar. We are starting to see activity come back into the market. Now, how is that affecting prices? Last week, the median price of those 57 homes that were sold was $500,000. That was up from the week before by about $2,500. And compared to last year's median price was $540. So we are down in price 7% year over year. Moving on to the breakdown of purchase methods for last week. Remember, we had 57 homes sold. 27 of those were conventional loan. 16 of those were cash, or 28% of the total sales were all cash. There were 7 FHA loans, no VAs, 1 seller financing, and 6 others. And remember, the others are categories that just weren't classified when we went through the data. They'll probably end up somewhere in one of these stats up here. But in the end, we had 57 total sales for last week. And this is a new stat that we are going to be tracking. Remember those phone calls that I've been getting? Some of the questions that I get are related to, are you going to see a flood of foreclosures? And the answer is we haven't seen it yet. And we will be tracking this week by week so that if it does trend up, we'll know. But what you're looking at here is last week from 4-2 to 4-8, there were no foreclosures to come onto our market and there were no short sales to come on the market. Year to date, we have had 6 foreclosures come onto the market. And that is very, very low. In a normal market, your distressed sales represent anywhere from 2% on the low end to 5% on the high end of your total inventory. 6 out of, what was it, 1,248 total homes isn't even 1%. It's barely trackable as a percentage. So we're really not seeing foreclosures come onto our market. But we will be keeping track of this stat. So if they do start to come onto the market, we'll know. That's it for this week, you guys. Thanks for watching, and don't miss the next video. So be sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell. Bye now.